Welcome to Breaking Sales, a podcast dedicated to helping you have tough, meaningful, and rewarding conversations with your prospects and clients. In meaningful, what we mean is these are the conversations you truly feel like you are the prospect or client's conversational peer. There's no anxiousness or uncertainty holding you back. You feel a sense of calm and confidence in asking the tough questions. You're not thrown off by the bad news, and you expect the prospect to think about and invest into the conversation as much as you do. On Breaking Sales, we use the filter of psychology and innate human behavior to deconstruct the many misleading sales approaches that actually work against your efforts to build trust and close the business. Let's get started. One of the biggest mistakes that sales professionals make is assuming that when a prospect has pain, they will solve it. That's simply not true. Think of how many challenges you have in your life. Do you solve all of them? No, of course not. You learn to live with some of them. You create stories that help you rationalize doing nothing or staying safe. Why? Because you consider the task of improving those circumstances harder than accepting the status quo. You learn to live with the discomfort versus embrace the uncertainty of doing something different and new. The only time you'll put the effort into improvement or change is when you have clarity on what you will create and or avoid as a result of making the change. Think about it. You know there are certain performance and conversation skills you can improve. So the question is, why don't you? You don't because there's no constant reminder regarding what you risk or gain if you do or don't. There's no future vision to keep you honest with yourself. This lack of clarity on future narrative impacts your prospects the same way it impacts you. If your prospect isn't clear on the benefit or risk in making a change, they too will rationalize doing nothing. It's just easier. Today on Breaking Sales, Pam and I dive into the concept of future narrative, the art of helping your prospect think beyond the chaos of today and into the clarity of tomorrow. We'll share a real client story about internal politics, regret minimization, and why sometimes you need to go backwards in your conversations to move forward. Speaking of future narrative, we at Lapa 180 have decided to put ourselves out there a bit, much like all of you do every day. And we're submitting Breaking Sales for the 2025 People's Choice Podcast Awards. If this show at all has helped challenge your thinking or shifted your approach to sales conversations, we'd be absolutely honored to have your support. Just visit www.podcastawards.com. That easy. www.podcastawards.com between July 1st and 31st and nominate Breaking Sales in the business category. Let's get started. Today, Pam, I want to talk about future narrative.
Okay.
And how important it is. And it might be actually the most important thing when a human being reflects on, do I change or not make a change?
Agreed.
So how it came up for me is last couple of weeks, and I want to figure out a way to share this with our listeners. A current prospect of ours, they are distracted by some internal politics. So this is how this came up.
Very common.
Yeah, board and C-suite politics. So it's kind of multi-level. Follow? They want to improve the performance of their sales organization. And how they describe that is they want to have more consistent pipeline, which we hear often, but they also want to be more effective in their conversations. And they're pretty clear on that now. All right. Which is great. They have a vision, but this distraction now is getting in the way, and they have a long sales cycle. So their sales cycle is 6 to 9 months. So anything that they find in June like right now, more than likely it's not going to turn into a client until 2026.
Again, super common. Yep, super common.
They're feeling this complexity about what's currently in front of them, which is distracting them, versus where they know they need to go down the road. And so I remember I was on the conversation on the call with them, and it was one of those moments, Pam, and you've had it and I've had it, and I absolutely let go. I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm not even going to worry about coaching or training. I thought we were there, but we're not. We need to go back to phase one, which is what you and I talk about all the time, which is this something that they really need to be spending any more time on? So it was interesting, right? I had already thought I had worked through phase one, which is, should they spend more time investing, exploring, making a change or not making a change? Is this worth it, right? I've already invested the time into phase two, and this conflict that's going on, or this politics that was going on, didn't really come up. And then it came up later in phase three, which is, should this change include lapping 180? So now I find myself going from this phase three all the way back to phase one, right? And I'm on the call, and this thought comes to my head, this phrase, right? Regret minimization.
Okay.
Which I know is really big for all of us, right? We don't want to have regrets. But yet at the same time, we don't like making mistakes. So it's this conflict that we always feel, right? Where in the moment or in the present, you don't want to make the mistake. And if you don't want to make the mistake and it takes over, you pull back from the action. And then when you pull back from the action, somewhere down the road, whether it's a day, a week, a month, a year, you feel the regret because you pulled back from the action. So I just remember thinking, okay, I don't want any regrets here. And I don't think they do either. And so at that moment, I just went right into future narrative. I slowed the whole conversation down. I said, okay, so you're dealing with some internal politics. There's some challenges. There's some conflict. At your convenience, or I don't know how I said, are you comfortable sharing at least some of the parameters for that? What you're experiencing. If you're not, that's fine. They started sharing some of the parameters, what was going on. I said, okay. And I listened and I asked some more questions. And then I said, okay, well, let's think forward now. You're dealing with this right now. How much of your mental energy is being spent on it? And they were like, well, probably 65, 70%. Okay. What's the rest of your mental energy being spent on? And they were like, trying to run the business. Okay. Do your people know about this? And they're like, yeah, our people sense it. I'm like, all right. How much of their mental energy is being spent on this? And he's like, maybe more. I go, okay. So how much of their energy is being spent on running, growing the business? And he was like, maybe 20%, right? This was his opinion. But I'm trying to help him think through in the moment, all right, what's that situation that he's dealing with and what's the impact at this moment? Then I went to, okay, so let's fast forward. You're 1 year from now. What do you want to make sure has changed or is in the process of changing? And he's like, well, all the things that we've been talking about. And I'm like, okay, I got it, but remind me again. Oh, I don't want to be assumptive here. So I really slowed it down, Pam, right? I became very methodical, and I absolutely had let go of doing business with them at all, because I wasn't convinced they should do change either, given how much this person was struggling with whatever the conflicts were internal. And he's like, well, I want to make sure we get better at the pipeline, get better at our conversations. I want to make sure we get better at this and that, right? And you went through about 3 or 4 things. I said, all right, so what actions no matter what else is going on in your business, I'm like, what actions do you have to commit to and focus on today? And what actions do you need your team focused on today so that you are on your path toward that 12 months from now? And that's when he's like, well, we have to get something like this going, and we have to start embedding this kind of mental attitude and this kind of approach within our culture. And I said, okay, that's fine. I said, so let's just say you wait 6 months. What happens? And he goes, well, given our sales cycle, right, we're going to be pushing results maybe off to third and fourth quarter of next year. And I'm like, I got it. But then what happens? And I could feel him getting a little frustrated. I could. And I had to remind him, I said, listen, I'm not trying to frustrate you. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to help you decide, all right, how do you work through this right now in the next 30 to 60 days? And I know, and there's a good chance it doesn't need to include us, but what do you got to work through? And that's what I'm trying to help you do right now. And there was a long pause, and he was like, yeah, I get it. I get that. The point, right, is that it was all about future. I had to help him get out of the intensity and the distraction of the moment, just so he could start thinking clearly again. Do I push for this? Do we do this? Or do I not push for this? And do we pull back and hold? That was the whole purpose of the conversation, Pam.
I love it.
So now, for our listeners, no, they have not decided to do anything yet, but I did get an email from the individual saying that it was an extremely helpful conversation. So
there's a couple things that you talked about just in that one example. We talk about this, Dan, when somebody is in the process of starting to debate the potential change. And those of you that work with us know that we coach a pattern of asking questions that's reflective of what we call past, present, future. And in the beginning stages, when somebody is starting to debate that change, it's important to allow them to talk about how they got to the point where they were debating the change. It's important to talk about how it is truly affecting them today. But then to your point, Dan, I think people minimize it's important in these early stages to help them go future and allow them to understand whether or not they can see themselves doing something differently. I have a sales professional, and he is so good in the early stages. He does a great job. And he asks the question, he'll say, I want you to go out a couple years, and I want you to think about, can you see yourself doing what you're doing today? No right or wrong. Can you see yourself doing what you're doing today in some form or fashion? And Dan, he does it in such an effective way that he will tell you plenty of times he gets the answer, yeah, I do think there are components of what we're doing today that I can see ourselves doing a couple of years from now. And he'll stop it right there, and he'll say, then we should talk about that a little bit more. You might not be ready. You might not be ready. And then there's plenty of times where they say, oh, no way. If we are still doing some of the things that we're doing today, there's going to be consequences to that. Okay, well, let's just stop right there and talk about that. And what I like about your example is if we don't do the best job early on to help somebody, all right, can you see yourself doing some of these components in the future, 2 to 3 years from now? Why or why not? Then I think, to your point, people struggle and they get all this, all right, there's always going to be something in front of me that's going to take priority in my own brain over this conversation because I'm in the early stages. I think you knowing that, we need to go back. I love that. And to our sales professionals, I don't think we do enough listening. We get so tied up that, okay, now they're moving towards change. And now we've created some momentum towards change. And we find ourselves not doing the best job of, it might mean we need to go back a bit and clarify what future state looks like with or without this change. Sounds like maybe we've got to go back and get more clarity there. I really like that. So paying attention to, in the early stages, how are we getting them to think about that? And then when you came to the conclusion, there's not enough clarity because they're allowing other things to take priority. And going back to that, why did we start this discussion in the first place? I think that's really important.
Yeah, Pam, if you remember too, one of the top 5 skill sets or approaches, I don't know what you would call it, right, that we talked about recently regarding closing and how high performers close is they have this patience. Now, they do drive a process and they have discipline. But when it comes to their conversations, they have patience. And that was an example too. I remember actually thinking about that when I was talking to this prospect where I got to go back. We may have gone through this phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And phase 3 is, does this need to include lapping 180 or not? But when we got there, it was time to go back. I had to be patient and realize this is on their time frame. This is important to them. I may not need to play a role in any of this, but what I can do is help them right now become objective and really think through what's their best options, what's their best paths.
I like the way you started this around talking.
You were saying?
With the regrets. I've always had this mentality that I don't believe in regrets because I truly believe that in the moment you are making the best decision possible for yourself. So what I like to reinforce is our role is to ensure that we are helping people make the best decision for themselves. And sometimes I just think we don't put enough effort into that process to help somebody make the best decision. So they don't look back and say, I think I regretted that because I didn't put enough effort into figuring out if this was the right thing for me to do or not. And I think that's what a lot of us suffer from when we think about, I think I have regrets from this decision because maybe I just didn't work hard enough to figure it out. And so now here I am down the road and there are some regrets. And again, if you are one of our folks that we coach, that's like a massive piece of our platform. You're supposed to be helping somebody think through this so that there are no regrets later.
Yeah, I agree because it actually, this idea of regret minimization came up with one of my clients, one of our clients, where they were dealing with a new client who had hired them, but that new client wasn't coming through with their agreed upon end of the bargain, right? There were certain things the new client had to do and get done. And the client was very distracted and was procrastinating, which was causing the transformation a big delay, which also had timelines on it. So it was causing everybody a ton of consternation, right? And when I was working with our client on it, I just said, okay, so how much change does all of this represent to your new client? And they were like, a lot. Okay, let's think about that. So what your new client has to go through is a ton of change. And they were like, yeah, okay. So whenever human beings are overwhelmed by change, what do? We pull back.
Yep.
Yeah. We revert. to what's easy. We revert to distractions that can make us feel productive, but we're not back into the change mode because we're overwhelmed. I said, so the first thing you have to do with this new client is try to help them gain clarity again. Try to help them understand that this is a part of what they want to do and they said they wanted to do to get to the point that they want to get to. But you have to help them look through the lens of, what do I need to take action on today if I want to be in a situation to be experiencing what I want tomorrow? I said, and that's the role that you play.
Exactly.
Right now, they're trying to kick the can down the road, even though they've already agreed to do business with you and they've signed the agreement. They're trying to kick the can down the road because they're overwhelmed. So now what you need to do is you need to come in and help them regain that clarity again on where they are and how today's actions are going to impact what they say they want or need to be down the road. You know, it's surprising, Pam, and I'm going to tell our listeners this because a lot of our listeners are in the service and the B2B service and IP, right. Types of business where they're offering a lot of competency, a lot of expertise to their clients. They're not selling widgets. You have to remember, listeners, that your prospect is human and they're going to be sometimes overwhelmed with change. Even after they might agree to do business with you, you have to help them. You got to stay patient. You got to support them. You got to ask questions, helping them remind themselves where they are today versus where they said they wanted to be tomorrow.
And keep those reminders throughout the conversation. Let's go back. Let's keep talking through. I agree.
Yeah, and the bigger the change, 100%, Pam, you're right. And then the more complex the change, right? So I know some of our clients, right? They're dealing with really cool opportunities where they won $3, $5, $7 million deals that represent incredible change to their clients. That's a lot of change. And so you have to sometimes help that client, remind that client, hey, where are you today? Where did you say you want to go? Let's walk through those paths. Let's walk through those options. You have to be there for them. I think that's a huge part of being a high-performing advisor or a high-performing sales professional.
Think about even personally, this is why vision boards are so popular. Like even for me, when I know I'm like, okay, there's something I'm working towards and it's going to mean I'm going to have to change a lot of things, new habits, new skills, putting old habits aside. Visually, I need that constant. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm doing this. There's that future state. That's what I'm looking to achieve. So think about
100%.
Yeah. If our sales professionals could try to, create a conversation that allows that prospect to keep this is part of it. You just got to keep that visual front and center as all these things try to distract you from that. To your point, we are human. And I know for me, I have got to keep reminders in front of me constantly about this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm doing this. Don't forget about that as all these other distractions and this mental brain of yours starts to get in your way.
That's a really good point. That should be another whole episode, but you're spot on. I mean, my wife and I, Dana, and you know Dana well, we meet all the time for coffee. And there's a informality to it, and sometimes there's a formality, but the informality is we're always talking about, okay, where are we going? Are we still going this direction? Are we still wanting that? Are we still wanting this? So we're always doing that. And I know when I go to sleep at night, more often than not, I'll spend about 30 seconds to a minute thinking about, again, where are we headed? I don't stress about it because I remind myself too that, hey, nothing I can do about it tonight.
Right.
But let me think of that positive component of, all right, where are we headed again?
Exactly. Where am I going? Where am I going?
There's always got to be something. Yeah. So again, future narrative for our listeners: help your prospect and clients think about that future state, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. Help them think about that future state that they want to get to. Invest in it. It might be the most important thing that you help that prospect and client do. Here's the thing about future narrative: it's not manipulation, it's clarity. When you help someone see where they're headed and what's at stake if they do nothing, or where they could be if they take action, you're not selling, you're serving them. Think about your own life and results. Would you benefit from someone asking you questions to help you become more objective in how you assess making improvements and/or change in your life? Of course you would. Would you view their questions that make you slow down and think as self-serving to them or valuable to you? Remember, your prospects are human beings dealing with the pressures and overwhelming uncertainties of their business each and every day. Your job isn't to add pressure, it's to add perspective to the chaos your prospects face. Until next time, remember, sales isn't about adding pressure. It's about helping someone create perspective to improve.